do some bridging the gap from our studying the Judges to bring us up to the time of David. And then we're going to look at some things that I think also will be very important as we go forward in our class. This is the introduction class to the life and character of David. This is going to be the same class that I taught over in one of the other classrooms 2 quarters ago. So based upon your feedback in the porch meetings, the elders decided let's go ahead and have multiple classes again. But there wasn't really enough time for all of us to prepare another class. So they decided let's just teach the same classes and just allow people to go to different classes if they choose to. So that's the point of this. If you were in the last class, you're welcome to be in this class. If you were in the last class and thought this was going to be a part 2 of David, I just want to make sure you know this is not part 2 of David. We are covering some of the same material. So in the book, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, I believe, is the syllabus. This is what we're going to be covering. This will be the sections that you'll want to read every week, getting ready for our Bible class. So it's Life and Character of David, 2025, quarter 2. Hopefully this will be accurate. I won't have to do a revised syllabus sometime along the way, but as history has pointed out to us, sometimes things change and we have to revise our syllabus. And the section in the middle, you might think, this is sort of odd, Dwayne. Why are you doing this? I'm actually providing you the text that we will be covering. It will be covering some of 1 Samuel and all of 2 Samuel. And I do that for various reasons. I want you to be able to have the text with wide columns so that you can make notes in the columns. I would love for this to be a resource for you going forward, that when you want to study the life and character of David, or if you're studying 1 or 2 Samuel sometime, you can pull your notebook out and you'll note all the things that we've talked about throughout the quarter as you've made those marks in there. In addition to that, those of you who were in our workshop I did last year on storytelling, I also have some stickers if you want them. Last time, I don't think anybody used the stickers, so I didn't make a bunch of copies of stickers. But one of the things that we did in our storytelling is we were demonstrating how to prepare to tell Bible stories. When we tell Bible stories, our brain should react in certain ways, produce these chemicals in our heads. If we're telling Bible stories in a very non-emotional, dry way, those chemicals aren't released in our brains to make us connected to God and excite us about those stories and excite us about being children of God. So we looked at story structure and how God really set up the story structure, and mankind has followed that. So all the things that you see in Hollywood as they write these stories that are very touching and that bring people's emotions out the way that God intended for them for that to happen, they learn that from God. So what I do is I do have some stickers for you if you want to participate in this, because at the end of this quarter, if you follow us through, you should be able to tell about 20 stories from the life of David to your kids and your grandkids. That's an added bonus. We'll learn how to tell these stories in a way that will elicit the response that God wants from your kids and grandkids, connect them to God, and let them know that God is amazing. I want to serve that God behind these stories that we're going to be talking about. So, as you'll notice in my version of the outline, these stickers I put on the columns. So that way we know in each story as I go along, what is the inciting incident? What's the first thing that moves this story? Here's the normal setting, and something had to happen to introduce our story, to make our story happen. And then along the way, you have what is called the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Well, if you have the outline, and if you can just write it in there, or if you want the stickers, you can put the stickers in there, so you'll know when I'm telling this story to my kids, this is a key moment, because this is the climax of this entire story that I'm telling them. I got to make this exciting for them so they know what's going on. So that's another reason why I put the text there. The particular version that I used is a text that is not... I can use it, okay? It's a text that you can use as long as you're using it for a church's study. So I can make copies of it. Usually churches have a 100-verse limit. Bibles have a 100-verse limit that you can use if you're going to quote the Bible. But this one's particularly you can use for that purpose. And then over here, I did not do this last time. because I was sort of trying to make it where I wanted people to put the stickers in there, but I realized people really weren't putting the stickers in there. And so this time what I did is I wrote questions for each lesson. So right now, you will have questions for all the lessons that we're going to be covering. They're the same question for every week. So you'll just take them off to the side, put them in the binder where they go, and answer those questions as we go along. All right, so before we go any further, let me go ahead and bow for a word of prayer. God, we're so thankful that you love us. We're so thankful that you have given us this exciting book that we have, that sometimes we take for granted, the Bible. And we're so grateful that you filled this Bible with the greatest story ever told, a story that makes us excited about being your children and gives us hope and gives us joy. And this is a story about how Jesus died for our sins, how you loved us so much that you sent your own Son to die for our sins. And in the middle of that major, big story that is so important to us, you have filled your word with a lot of other stories that are so compelling. And in all these other stories, we see people who have acted ways that are not pleasing to you, so we know what not to do. And we've seen people who have acted in ways that are pleasing to you, so we know what we are supposed to do. But most of all in these stories, not only do we see great men like Samuel and David and others, we see you. We're connected to you as we study the life and character of David. Help our hearts as we open your book up and as we look at some very important, fascinating things that you have kept for us so that we can pass those on to our kids and our grandkids. We love you so much. In Jesus we pray. Amen. All right. So what we're going to do today is the first section of our class is we're going to sort of bridge the gap between our last study in the book of Judges and our study in the life of David. So if you recall, in the book of Judges, the time period was characterized that there was no king in Israel, and everybody did what was right in his or her own eyes. As a result of that, they weren't following God's law anymore. Everybody would decide, hey, what do I want to do? And that's what they would do. Total chaos. God was out of the picture for the most part until God would send some enemy to have some kind of dominance over them, and that would become so bad, they would get so frustrated and be in so much anguish over that, they would finally cry out to God. God would hear their cries, raise up a judge, and that judge would help them militarily overcome the enemy and try to bring them back to God to some degree. And that judge would die, and the whole cycle would start again. And we noted that it wasn't just a cycle, it was a spiral downward. And the book finished up with two specific examples of what happens when there is no God in Israel and everybody does what is right in their own eyes. Is you have the story of the Danites worshiping Micah worshiping false idols, and the Danites stealing the Levites, stealing all this. It's just total chaos. And then you have the story of the Levite and the concubine, which is reminiscent of the story of Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, where there's rape involved, and the guy is not serving his concubine very well. It's just total chaos. And then there's destruction of all the Benjamites, and then they cry out, the Benjamites, we've killed all the women, the Benjamites don't have anybody to marry, and so they go take Jabesh Gilead and take all their women, but there's only 400 women there that are virgins, and now they have 200 more women they need, and so they've devised this situation where there's this party going on, or this festival going on, and say, you go up there and you just sort of hide in the bushes, and when the girls come by, you just grab one of them and take them home, and we'll appease the people saying, you've kept your vow by not giving your daughters away. So it was just total chaos. So we have to bridge that total chaos, and where God is not even important to the children of Israel unless they're in trouble and they cry out to God, to where David can come onto the scene and he can build up this united kingdom, lead into Solomon, some of the greatest time in Israel history. And so the first person we have to really take note of in this is Samuel. Samuel was a man who was born and lived in this judge's time period. He is known as the last judge. And in that time period, it was a very, very low point in their history. Eli was, for the most part, a good man, from what we can tell, except he had one major flaw, and that is his sons were evil, and he did not restrain them for doing bad things. And so they would steal some of the sacrifice that belonged to God for themselves. Even before it was cooked, they would take a special knife in there and they would put it in there, and whatever would come out, they would take, totally opposite of what God wanted. And there's even some prostitution going on there. They're taking the women. They're not acting the way that they should with the women. And Eli warns them, sons, what are you doing? This is not how you're supposed to be acting, but he didn't stop them. And there's a small phrase in there that says Eli actually became fat off what his sons were doing. So that special meat that they were taking, that was the good fatty part. Some of you like the fatty part of the meat, and that was the good part, and they were taking that, and Eli was, you really shouldn't be doing that, but pass the meat over here. That stuff tastes really good. So he was getting fat off their sin. He wasn't restraining them. As a result of that, God gives the first message that he talked to Samuel, and one of the things that characterized the time with the judges is God wasn't given regular communication to the people. He was like, I'm not talking to you guys right now unless you straighten up. And when Samuel came along, there is a shift in that where God does start delivering messages to the people through Samuel. And the first one was that he was a little boy, and God tells Samuel, you recall the instance, he hears the voice, he goes to Eli, yes, sir, it's not me. 3 times, finally the 4th time, listen to this is the Lord. Ask the Lord, he's going to give you a message. The Lord gives the message, and the message is a repeat of what God had already told Eli, and it was basically, your sons are evil, I'm cutting your house off. So you're no longer going to be priest. And so the next morning, Eli says, hey, what God say to you? Tell me everything, don't hold anything back. And so Samuel does tell him everything. Well, what happens after that is there's this battle. And the children of Israel, we talk a little bit about this in the Judges, they feel that the Ark of the Covenant is almost like a good luck charm. If we take the Ark of the Covenant with us to battle, that represents the presence of God. And if the Ark's there, God sort of is obligated to be there with us. Well, God wasn't there with them. They lost the battle. The Ark was carried into captivity. Both of Eli's sons die in the battle. And they come back and they tell Eli, your sons have died and the Ark of the Lord has been carried into captivity by the Philistines. Well, when he hears that, the Bible says he was a very big man. He fell over backwards, hit his head, broke his neck, and died. This is where Samuel comes. This is where he really begins his ministry to the Lord in this very evil time of God's people. But Samuel does something that is so important to bridge this gap getting us to David. He does begin to nationalize their religion again. Instead of everybody doing what was right in their own eyes, it says that God did speak to the people through Samuel during this time period. Samuel would judge the people. Samuel would lead the people in a religious way. He would call them back to God, and he would make this circuit going around to various cities, always coming back to his hometown. And so it's very important that we understand Samuel has a key part in bridging this gap, and that is on a religious front, getting the people to transition from there's no king, everybody does what is right in their own eyes. Well, maybe we should start doing what is right in God's eyes and listening to the things that he has to say for us. So much so that there was a battle with the Philistines, that Samuel calls the people together. He tells them that they need to get rid of all of their idols. So basically, it would be a meeting that would go something similar to this. Hey guys, quit messing around. All right, you say you want to serve God, but I see all these idols. If you really, really want to serve God, you're going to have to make some changes. And the first change you're going to have to make is to eliminate and destroy all your idols. Until you do that, this isn't going to work. And so they do. And they have this great victory with against the Philistines. And the Bible does say that when Samuel was leading the people, they continued to have victory against the Philistines. So it was very important that we understand how Samuel fits into this story. After a while, Samuel's getting old, and a challenge as we study and read the Bible, especially those of us who are parents, we have the same dilemma that Samuel has, that Eli had, without maybe not identical, but similar, because Samuel has some sons, but his sons aren't following God. And so the people see this, and they're like, Samuel, no offense, but you're old. All right, you're not going to be around much longer, and you say you're going to leave these two yahoos in charge of us? These aren't going to be good people. They're not serving God. This can't work, and they cry out for a king. Why don't you just give us a king like all the other nations around us? And so this displeases Samuel. Samuel goes to God and says, God, they want a king. God says, give it to them. But first, before you give them a king, go tell them what that means. Go tell them all the things the king is going to do to them, how the king is going to treat them. And so that's exactly what Samuel does. He goes and lays it out. He's going to take your daughters, make them perfumers. They're going to make them cooks and bakers, all this stuff. They're going to take your sons, make them warriors, take your stuff from you. Everything that's good. If you have a nice house, they're going to take your house away from you and give it to one of his servants. I mean, that's just the way life's going to be. And they say, that's fine with us. We want a king. And so he goes back to God, and God says, give them what they want. And so we're introduced to the second major character in this bridge time period, and that is Saul. So Saul is the one God has chosen to be the first king over Israel. Now Samuel is the one that anoints him. So Saul is anointed by himself. Nobody else is around. This is when he's looking for his donkeys. If you recall the story, he's looking for his donkeys. He's not finding his donkeys. They go to Samuel. They have a few bucks in their pocket, and they give it to Samuel. They're going to give it to Samuel to tell them where the donkeys are. And when he gets there, shock of his life. All right, your donkeys are okay. Your dad is starting to worry about you. You're going to be the first king of Israel. He's like, what? What are you talking about? Why are you telling me this stuff? You realize who I am? I'm a nobody from nowhere. I don't need to be king. I can't be king. What are you talking about? And so he ends up prophesying on his way home. And then eventually, we're going to give you what you want. We're going to give you a king. And so they all gather together. Remember, Kish is taken, then Saul is taken, but they can't find him. And they ask God, is he around? Oh, yeah, he's here. He's hiding behind the equipment. They finally bring him out. They anoint him. But there's a group of people who don't want Saul to be king. Who's that guy? Why can that guy be king? And so they don't want him to be king. They don't think he's qualified to be king. Well, the men of Jabesh Gilead find themselves in a very difficult time. They're surrounded. They're ready to give up. And they've bought themselves a week time and says, we will surrender to you in 1 week if we can't find anybody to come fight for us. And so they send all these messages around, hey, we're surrounded. They're going to come take us. And then Saul says, what in the world's going on? He comes in from plowing the fields one day with his donkeys, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He sacrifices the animals there. He sends them around, sort of like the Levite did, but he sends the oxen around to all the tribes and says, look, everybody get here now, because we got to go protect our brothers at Jabesh Gilead. They assemble, they send word to Jabesh Gilead, we'll be there by tomorrow. So the people of Jabesh Gilead give word to the people surrounding them saying, hey, we're going to surrender tomorrow. Now they're not going to surrender tomorrow, they're waiting for the help. The help comes, they have this huge victory. Then everybody says, hey, Saul's a great king, this is wonderful. And the people who heard others complaining about Saul being king say, hey, we got to kill those guys. Who were those guys that said Saul wasn't going to be king? And Saul was like, look, no one's going to die today. And Saul had two major departures from the Lord. One is he did not obey everything God told him to do. But before that, he offered a sacrifice he wasn't supposed to offer. Both of those times, God sends Samuel to him to tell him, the Lord is upset with you. You have not done what you were supposed to do. Therefore, the Lord has decided to take the kingdom away from you and Jonathan, your lineage, and he's looking for someone better than you. He's looking for someone who has a heart like his heart. And so Saul is another important figure. Now, I do think we need to make sure that we understand something about Saul here, because as we continue to study the overlap between David and Saul, most of the time we will get a very bad image in our heads about Saul. We'll be like, there's nothing good in this man. Obviously, there was something good when God chose him. Samuel's going to allude to that when he says, when you were chosen, you were little in your own eyes. So he had some humility at the beginning of his life, but that humility left him, and he no longer had that. So though Saul ultimately failed spiritually, he did play a key role in unifying Israel militarily. Under his leaderships, the tribes, once scattered and independent, began to function as a united nation. He rallied them to fight together against common enemies like the Ammonites and the Philistines, helping shift Israel from a loose tribal confederation where everyone did what was right in their own eyes to a more centralized kingdom where national interests began to take priority over local ones. So Saul's reign did lay the groundwork for Israel to start acting more like one group of people. So Samuel, he sort of got the people thinking better spiritually. Talking for God, bringing people back to God instead of everybody doing what was right in their own eyes. Saul started building more of a national thought process that we're not just tribes. We are one nation, and they had a military, and they went out and did military campaigns together. So when we start talking about David on Wednesday, we're not even going to talk about David today, sorry. When we start talking to David about David on Wednesday, we'll see the importance of those two things. Any thoughts or any questions on just that bridging of the gap and getting us from the judges that we just finished studying to where Samuel is going to anoint David king on Wednesday?
I think it's interesting that we've seen Israel plagued by idolatry, right? They fall into idolatry, and we all know where idolatry comes from is people, they want something they can see, feel, and touch. And I think their desire for a king is from that same place. They had a king. They just couldn't see him. They couldn't touch him. And so they abandoned God in favor of an idol, an earthly king. You know what I'm saying? It's that same mentality that led them into their desire for that earthly king because they needed an idol. They need something that quote unquote represented God to them because they had rejected the king.
Absolutely. So there's a lot that goes in with the rejection. Are they rejecting Samuel? That's what he thought. No, they're not rejecting you. God says specifically, they are rejecting me. And I don't necessarily think it was a rejection of the system of government, of judges, or the loose system maybe of being different tribes. They just wanted a person to represent God for them and to fight their battles for them. And it brings up very interesting conversations about why in the world throughout history have people always wanted larger governments to do things for them instead of them doing things for themselves. And that's what we see here. And that's what men tend to gravitate to for some reason. All right, so I want to make this point. You're going to hear me say this a bunch of times this quarter. These are true stories. These aren't made up fictional accounts of what an author has decided would it make a good story. These are, here it is, these are real people with real personalities making real decisions in real time that have real consequences. Just like you and I, they don't have a pause button in their life. So when they are encountering all these things that are happening simultaneously, and all these things seem to be coming to them on 1,000 different directions, like we feel sometimes, and we would like to wish, and most of us probably have at least one time in our lives, where if we could go back to a particular time in our life and just hit the pause button for a second and think things through a little bit differently, we may have made a different choice. But things are happening so fast, we don't take that time. And we always can do that, but we tend not to hit the pause button, and we tend to react to what's going on around us. You've been around enough people, you've done it enough yourself, for one. And you've been around enough people who do it all the time, live their life in a reactive way, that things are coming at them and they're like, I can't help it. I got to make a decision. I got to make it right now. I can't do anything about it. I'm just being flooded. And we don't hit the pause button. We make bad choices. That's what they were living through. And what they were living through a lot of times was way more stressful and way more intense than what we're living through. I mean, their life was hanging by a thread many times. Now, most of us, our lives aren't hanging by a thread every single day. We don't have people encamped around our house saying they're going to kill us to make a decision now. So we have to give them, in our study, give them a little bit of grace, forgiveness, mercy, and judging them. These were real people with real personalities making real decisions in real time, and those decisions had real and oftentimes immediate and oftentimes long-lasting consequences, not only to them but to their families. So the next section that we're going to cover is a little odd, I'll have to be honest with you, for a Bible class. But I found myself talking about this so much during the last time I taught it, and it was sort of confusing to people that I wanted to take some time to explain it now. Personalities. Do you understand why people do things when you know them personally and you know what personality they have? Does that make it easier to figure out why they did that? And there's some people you'd say, all right, I know that person well enough, I know their personality, and if this happens, I can almost predict what they're going to do based upon their personality. And so we're going to take some time to talk about personalities just for a few minutes, because we're going to do some thinking about these people from a personality standpoint. What made Saul do this? Why did Saul act this way? Why did Jonathan act this way? Why did Saul and Jonathan have all these ins and outs? Why was David so attached to Jonathan and Jonathan so attached to David? Some of this is going to come from their view towards God. Some of it's going to be made even stronger or fortified by their personalities. Is there somebody in your life, think about it for a second, is there somebody in your life that has a personality that you just don't like? So you can go like this, or you can go like this. I like everybody's personality, get along with everybody equally, all right? Is there somebody in your life that if you boil it down to, you say, you know what, I just don't get along with that person because their personality rubs me the wrong way? Raise your hand if you can say that about at least one person in this world. All right, not everybody, but most of us can say that about somebody. Well, these are real people with real personalities in the Bible. And so if we take the time to look at their personalities, we might get some greater insights into who these people are as we prepare to tell these stories to our kids and grandkids, and we'll get a lot more out of it for our own use as well. So there's two things that sort of, I want you to bring to your attention as we start this idea of personalities. We're going to look briefly at the disc profile because it is not copyrighted, so we can use it as much as we want through the idea of this course. It does divide personalities up into 4 different quadrants. When Shelly and I had young kids, I think our oldest was 10 at the time, so that means 10, 8, 6, and 4. We were homeschooling our kids, and we went to this conference in Dallas where this man was speaking, and this man was hired by the Arizona Diamondbacks when they first became a baseball franchise to analyze all the players' personalities and to analyze the personalities of all the people in the draft so they know who to draft. So we want you to tell us what these guys' personalities are so that we can draft them based upon their personalities. And this is like the first time this has ever been done by Major League Baseball. It was a new system. So this guy is talking to a bunch of homeschoolers, homeschool parents, and a bunch of us are in there. So he goes, this is what I want you to do. I want you to think for yourself, and I want you to think for your kids. We're going to divide this big auditorium into 4 sections. And he divided us into 4 sections based upon just 2 questions to figure out what personality you have and what personality all of your kids have. He said, if you are task-driven, go to this side. If you're people-driven, go to this side. So all of us are getting our kids, and we're saying, where our kids go, all right, we're sending our 4-year-old and our 6-year-old. You guys got to go to that side of the auditorium, away from mom and dad, because you're more people-driven. We're more whatever the case may be. So all these people are getting separated from their kids as we're dividing this up. And then, so the task-driven people are on this side. The people are driven over there. Then he said, now I want outgoing to come up this way. So task-generated, outgoing up here. Task-generated, being an introvert back here. Same thing over here. No, yeah. And say, so now you're people-driven over here. If you are an outgoing person, you're in this quadrant. If you are an extrovert, you're in this quadrant. And in 2 questions, he had all of us divided up into what our personality is based upon that 4-quadrant personality profile. I thought it was an ingenious thing, and it was very eye-opening to us, because his point was, if you are a parent trying to teach your children and you don't know what your children's personality is, you're going to have a hard time interacting with them. You're going to want them to have a personality like you, because that's easy. No, none of our kids are in here. Most of our kids are not in here, so we only have a few kids in here. Chances are, if you have multiple children, you connect easier with maybe one of your kids than another one. That could be personality driven. It's just a natural, it's not necessarily liking the same thing. I mean, we just think the same way. Our personality is the same. And so you need to know that. And you need to know why that kid you're trying to teach math to is driving you up the wall. It might have to do with, not that he can't do math or she can't do math, but because your personalities are opposite. And so that was one way to determine that. So as we're looking at characters in the Bible, I don't know that we ever do this. That's one thing that I want to help us do. We never take the time to figure out, all right, they're acting this way. What part does their personality play in this? And then we might not be so surprised why they're acting that way. We might understand why they're acting that way. And I think that will be helpful to us, even going forward, as we study God's Word together. There's one more thing I want to tell you about this, just give you an idea here. So that's the disc. Dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientious are the 4 categories that they use. Another, I don't know if I have, I have that. So another way that I've heard this described, I used to do workshops, and one of the things that I did was a little bit on personalities, and it was described this way as a football game. A D-type personality is going to be your running back. They're going to score a touchdown regardless of how many people are trying to stop them. And if you get in their way, what are they going to do? Run over you. So have you ever known someone like that? Not in the football field, but just in the office situation or at work or school that, you're like, I'm staying out of that person's way because if I get crossways with them, they're going to run me over. And if I get in their way, and this has ramifications. What happens if I have numbers or I have information a D-type personality needs before a D-type personality can make a decision? And he can't make that decision until I give him what he needs or she needs to make that decision? How many phone calls, how many emails, how many knocks at the door do you think I'm going to get? And I'm probably going to put him at the top of the list, right? I'm getting this done for this guy because he's going to drive me nuts. That's the running back. The influencer, in this football analogy, it was the cheerleader. And the steadiness, it was the guy after the play is over, the guy that goes even to the opposing team and reaches down and picks them up. He's the helper, he's the cooperative type person. And then the conscientious person is the person who makes the football. And the way the illustration went there, they will research for hours the exact skin to use to make the perfect football. They will know exactly what thread they should use. They will stitch it perfectly, and they will hand you and if you say, hey, the football has a range at which it can be inflated. Well, that'll drive them nuts. No. Well, I need a range. They don't need a range. Give me an exact PSI for that. And they'll put it exactly that number. They're just very conscientious, perfectionists, want to get things done the right way. So we have these characters that we're going to be talking about. And if we have no idea of what personality they have, we're going to miss some very important parts of the story. And so throughout the course of the class, we are going to use artificial intelligence to come up with this, because we can't do it. It would take us too long to analyze all these personalities, but on a thing like this, artificial intelligence can do it pretty fast. I was amazed. Because in our storytelling workshop I was doing, I actually got stuck here. I was like, I know that we need to know these people's personality, but I can't sit down and do a personality, analyze everyone's personality and have these big sheets and all this good stuff. And then when I was teaching the David class, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to check and see what I can come up with if I just ask AI to do this, and it gives you a pretty good indication. It'll read every story about this person in the Bible, and it'll start analyzing their personality to some degree. Is it 100%? Probably not. What I've read has been pretty good, but we're going to use that tool so that we can get some of this a little bit faster than if we all had to do it ourselves. Does that make sense? All right, so let's just go through the strengths and weaknesses of each of these personalities so we know what we're talking about. And I also want to note this. What complicates this even more is that our personalities can change over time, and our personalities can change in circumstances and situations. Like, you might be different at home than you are at work. You've realized in order to be successful at work, this has to be my personality. It might not be my natural personality, but I sort of got to overcome this. The second thing that we have to understand is nobody is absolutely just in one quadrant. We are all in all the quadrants. And so don't get the idea that if this is my personality, then I don't have any of these other character traits. You probably do. It's just when you're under stress, one of your main personality will end up coming out. So just because I want to make sure that you understand the significance of this, what we see in King Saul is when stress starts to happen, he goes all in on his dominance. And what happens is, let's say he's mid-dominant. When he's under stress, he goes all the way. I mean, he just hits it all. He's throwing spears at Jonathan. He's trying to kill Michael. He is executing priests. He's tracking David down, all over the place, trying to kill David. That has a lot to do with not only his personality, but his relationship with God. But his personality does play into it. So he doesn't hit the pause button. Let me think for a second. What should I be doing? Remember Eli's response? I didn't mention this, but when Samuel told Eli the message from God, what was Eli's response? He is the Lord. Let it happen according to his will. So if Eli were Saul, these stories don't take place the way that they take place. If Saul had more of a passive personality, he might have just said, okay, God, I'll do whatever you want. I'll lay it. But he didn't do that. He reacts in a totally different way. So some of you, I know you guys have already read this because you couldn't help it and you didn't listen to anything I said. I also want to make this point. If this is your dominant personality, you'll look at the strengths and that's how you'll see yourself. If this is your dominant personality and you're crossways with someone, what are they seeing? They're seeing the weaknesses. In other words, these strengths they're blind-eyed to the strengths. All I'm noticing are the weaknesses. So strengths for the D-type personality: decisive, quick to act, goal-oriented, driven, confident in leadership roles, thrives in challenging environments, strong problem solver under pressure. No company can survive, no church can survive, no family can survive well unless there's some D in us that is driving the things in the next direction. So D's can be frustrating for some people, but we need people like that in order to get anything done. Their weaknesses: they can be impatient or frustrated. They may come across as very abrasive or blunt. They tend to overlook details. And they might ignore input from others. I mean, input, it takes too long to get input. and my decisions are going to be right anyway, so why would I listen to you? Okay? So this is just a situation. I don't need to go through this. I think that's what Saul does a lot. He doesn't take the time to get wise counsel and figure out what to do next. He's just, hey, I'm doing what I want to do because this is who I am. And they can seem to be controlling, and they can seem to be intimidating. If you're intimidated by someone, chances are they have a high D part of their personality. And that's what's intimidating you. You're worried that they're going to run over you, they're going to hurt you. It's easier just do what they say, how they say it, and when they say it. It's so much easier. I'll just do that, and that'll save myself a lot of time. You'll see they're task-driven and they're extroverted, and I have the running back there. The strengths of the influencer: outgoing, enthusiastic, they're persuasive, and they're motivating. They bring positive energy to teams. They have strong communication skills. They're often optimistic and creative. And they can drive D's totally crazy. Their weaknesses: they struggle with following through. Because, hey, there's another party to plan, there's something else to go do, and they have a hard time doing this. They can be disorganized. They can avoid confrontation. They may overpromise and underdeliver, and they seek approval from others. The strengths of the S personality: they're steady, they're loyal, they're dependable, they are patient, they're good team players, usually a good listener. If somebody is just an unusually good listener, and you notice that about them, there could be have a lot of S in them. They're consistent, they're calm under stress, they're supportive of other people, they're empathetic. Their weaknesses is they resist change, or they're routine-based. They don't like conflict either. They struggle with being assertive. And what happens on a work side of this, if you're an S and somebody asks you to do something, you have a hard time saying no. And so, yeah, I can get that done. I can do that done. But what happens if you overpromise and you can't deliver, and the person you're not delivering to is a D-type personality? Well, you have problems because they're going to be banging on your door. You told me you could do that, and you haven't gotten it done at a particular time. And they can be slow to make decisions, and they are overly accommodate other people to where they don't get their own work done sometimes. They're doing if they see you're struggling, they're going to stop what they're doing, they're going to help you with your work, and before you know it, maybe they didn't get their work done, and there's a problem going to be later on with the boss. So, conscientious, very detail-oriented and precise, analytical and logical. They value high standards and rules. They strive for excellence. They're very organized and methodical. But their weaknesses are they're overly critical of themselves and others. Go back to making the football analogy. This thread's not perfect. Redo it. They have to have everything done perfectly. And you probably met people like this. This is why personalities are so valuable to study, I think, even in studying the Bible characters, is that you've probably met someone who's this way to where they are paralyzed. They can't make decisions. They can't do something. They can't get the job done perfect enough for themselves, and so they can never pass it on to someone else because what if it's not right? What if there's one thing wrong? What if I miscalculated something? What if I did something wrong in the grammar, or this, that, or the other? And so it can be very, very troubling to them. So they have paralyzed by perfectionism. And sometimes it can hurt relationships because they don't only expect perfectionism out of themselves. Who else do they expect it out of? Everyone else. And as a parent, you have to be guard against that, because if you expect your kids to be perfect, I have some... hopefully this isn't new to anybody. Your kids are not going to be perfect. They can seem cold and distant, just a matter of fact. So just give me the information. And they can resist delegating or collaborating with people. Why? Because no one else is going to do it as good as I can. They're going to turn in shoddy work. So on Wednesday, Shelley and I are going to be out of town. So we're going to leave the class in Joe's hands. And with this as our foundation, Joe is going to teach 1 Samuel chapter 16, answer the questions that are provided for you in the right-hand part of the book. and be ready for an open discussion. Thank you, everybody.